What Marceline saw, a small cat pressed against the side wall of the First Methodist Fellowship Hall, below the window where the furnace exhaust came through, sitting in the one dry patch of gravel on an otherwise wet April morning. What the cat did, turned her head when the side door opened, assessed the woman who stepped out, and did not run. Marceline Drax had lived in Harlan, Kentucky for 53 of her 61 years, and she could tell the difference between a cat that was lost and a cat that had arrived. This one had arrived. The wet gravel around her was undisturbed in every direction except from the alley that ran behind the old Massey hardware building, which meant she had come from somewhere specific by a specific route and had chosen this specific wall to sit against. The furnace exhaust would have made it warm. The overhang kept off most of the rain. She was not a large cat. Her coat was the orange-brown of old pine bark, damp now and flattened against her frame, which was slim but not desperate. Her ears were large for her head, and they moved independently, reading the sounds of the street and the alley and the fellowship hall behind Marceline. She wore no collar. "You can't stay there," Marceline said. The cat looked at her. One ear rotated toward the alley. The other stayed pointed at Marceline. "I'm serious," Marceline said. She went back inside. What Marceline saw 2 days later, the same cat, same wall, same spot below the furnace exhaust. This time sitting with her front paws tucked, eyes half closed. What the cat did, opened her eyes fully when Marceline appeared, straightened and watched her cross the parking lot to her car without moving from her position. The fellowship hall at First Methodist was Marceline's job in the mornings, 3 days a week. She swept the linoleum, wiped the folding tables, cleaned the 2 bathrooms, restocked the paper goods, and checked the supply closet inventory against the list on the clipboard that hung just inside the door. She had been doing this for 11 years. Before that, she had done it for the Presbyterian Church on the other end of Main Street, and before that, she had worked the counter at the Harlan County Pharmacy, and before that, she had been married to a man named Gerald Drax, who had died on a Tuesday afternoon in February, 12 years ago. In the middle of a sentence he was saying to her about whether they needed more rock salt for the front walk. He had been mid-sentence. That was the part she still carried. The house on Sycamore Hill Road was too large for one person, and she knew it, and she kept it anyway, kept it clean, kept the gutters clear, kept the porch boards sealed against the wet that came up off the mountain in spring. The neighbors along the road were sparse and friendly in the way of people who respected distance. The closest one was a woman named Bertie Oakes, 70-something, who kept a vegetable garden that ran nearly to the road and grew the best tomatoes in the county and knew it. Marceline had a system. Systems were her gift and her preference. The house ran on one, her days ran on one. The fellowship hall ran on hers, though she would not have said so to the pastor. The system did not include a cat. What the cat saw, or rather, what any careful observer watching the cat would have noted, that on the 3rd morning, she moved. She had been at the wall below the furnace exhaust for 3 days running when Marceline came around the corner of the building to find her not at the wall but 6 feet to the left of it, positioned directly in the path between the parking lot and the side door. Not blocking the door, just in the way enough that to ignore her entirely would require a deliberate step around. What Marceline did, stepped around her. What the cat did, turned to watch her go, then stood, then walked, not rushed, not performing distress, and positioned herself 3 feet to the left of the side door, on the dry concrete step below it, and sat down again. Marceline unlocked the door, went inside, and spent 20 minutes cleaning the bathrooms with more speed than usual. Assesse. Her name, she would learn later, had been Cora, not her original name, possibly. That was something the woman at the animal rescue on Minor Street would tell her, weeks from now, that the cat had belonged to a man named Alton Prewitt, who had rented the apartment above Massey Hardware for 4 years before his health had made him move to his daughter's house in Knoxville the previous October. He had not been able to take the cat. He had asked his neighbor, a young man named Darby, to look after her. Darby had done his best, which was to say he had left food out and the cat had managed. And then in March, the young man had moved himself to Lexington for work and the food had stopped appearing and the cat had been on her own for 5 weeks. 5 weeks in the cold end of an Appalachian spring, which is not the same spring that arrives in lower, warmer places. The mountains hold winter the way a closed fist holds water, reluctantly and longer than seems reasonable. In March, the hollows still carry ice in the mornings, and the creek that ran along the back of Massey Hardware had been running high and grey with snowmelt for most of that time. The cat had managed. She had been managing. But the furnace exhaust was warm, and Marceline smelled consistently of the same cleaning products in the same order, which meant she was reliable, and reliable was something the cat had learned to find before it disappeared again. What Marceline saw on the 7th day? Nothing. The wall was empty. The concrete step was empty. The gravel was undisturbed. What Marceline did, stood at the side door for longer than she needed to before going inside. She cleaned the linoleum and restocked the paper goods and checked the clipboard inventory and did not think about the cat. This was not difficult. She was practiced at the discipline of not thinking about things that could not be helped. The fellowship hall was the same. The list on the clipboard was the same. The morning was the same. She was filling the paper towel dispenser in the second bathroom when she heard a sound from the direction of the storage closet at the end of the hall. Not a large sound, a small, dry sound, like cardboard shifting. She stood in the bathroom doorway for a moment. She walked to the storage closet. The door was ajar. She was certain she had left it closed, as she always left it closed, because the inventory ran off the rails when people left it open and helped themselves to supplies without marking the sheet. She pushed it open with her fingertips. The cat was inside. She was sitting on the lower shelf between a case of paper cups and a box of coffee filters, looking at Marceline with the alert, self-possessed expression of an animal that had gotten exactly where it intended to go and was prepared to explain nothing about how. "How did you get in here?" Marceline said. The cat blinked once. The door had been locked when Marceline arrived. She had unlocked it herself. The storage closet had no window, no secondary entrance, no gap in the baseboard large enough for a mouse, let alone a cat of any substance. Marceline stood in the doorway and looked at her and understood that she was not going to solve this particular question today. "You can't stay in here," she said. "There's food in here." The cat looked at the case of paper cups, then back at Marceline. "Paper cups," Marceline said. "Not for you." She set down her paper towel roll, picked up the cat, who allowed this with the resigned cooperation of someone tolerating a necessary inconvenience, and carried her to the side door and set her outside on the concrete step. She went back inside and locked the door. She finished the inventory. She checked the closet door twice on her way out. What the cat saw from the concrete step, Marceline's car, a 10-year-old Subaru, the color of river clay, pulling out of the parking lot in the direction of Sycamore Hill Road. What the cat did, watched it go, then jumped down from the step and crossed the parking lot and went around the corner of the building and was not seen again that day. Harlan in April is a specific kind of beautiful that does not announce itself. The mountains come back green all at once after weeks of grey, and when the light is right in the late afternoon, low and amber and coming through the gap between Pine Mountain and Black Mountain, the whole town looks briefly like something from a postcard someone kept too long. The smell in April is wet earth and creek water and the faint sweetness of redbud trees which bloom along every road and hillside without being asked and without caring whether anyone is watching. Marceline drove through it twice a day and largely did not notice it. This was not indifference. It was the specific inattention of someone whose life has contracted to the width of what needs to be done. The house on Sycamore Hill Road was at the end of a gravel lane that ran off the main road and climbed slightly before leveling out at a wide, flat yard. The house itself was white clapboard, 2 stories, with a covered porch that faced the mountain. Gerald had built the porch addition the summer they turned 50. She still thought of it as his porch. She sat on it in the evenings sometimes, in the old glider with the faded blue cushion, but less than she used to. The mornings, she made coffee in the kitchen, while the radio played the local public station, which she kept at a volume just above silence. Gerald had been the one who kept it loud. She had turned it down after, and she had never turned it back up. The house had Gerald's tools in the garage, his books on the shelf in the study, his winter coats in the hall closet because she had sorted through everything twice and gotten as far as the hall closet and stopped. The coats were still there. They were perfectly good coats. This was not avoidance, she told herself. This was practicality. Good coats should not be wasted. She told herself this credibly enough that she mostly believed it. Calm. The cat appeared at the house on a Tuesday. Marceline came home from the fellowship hall to find her sitting on the porch railing at the far left end, where the railing met the corner post, in the narrow triangle of afternoon light that the post's shadow did not reach. She was sitting with her front paws arranged neatly together and her tail hanging over the railing's edge, and she was looking at the mountain. Not at the door, not at Marceline's car, at the mountain. Marceline sat in her car in the driveway for a moment. "How did you find me?" she said. The windows were up. The cat could not have heard her. She said it anyway. The cat continued looking at the mountain. Marceline got out of the car, walked up the porch steps, crossed the length of the porch, and stood 2 feet from the cat. The cat turned her head and looked at her with the direct, unhurried gaze that Marceline had by now identified as this particular animal's primary mode of communication: sustained, unapologetic attention. "You walked 4 miles, Marceline said. The cat lowered her chin slightly. "That's not my problem." She unlocked the front door and went inside. The cat jumped down from the railing, walked to the front door, and sat in front of it. Marceline stood in her hallway with her keys in her hand and looked at the door and the outline of the cat visible through the door's narrow side window. The cat was sitting perfectly upright. Her tail was still. She looked through the glass like something that had been placed there deliberately. Marceline put her keys on the hook by the door. She opened the door. "One night," she said. "You can come in for one night because it's going to rain." The sky, in fact, showed no sign of rain. The afternoon was clear, with a high blue sky above the mountain and the kind of mild air that April sends down from the ridges in the late part of the day. But the cat stepped through the door without checking the weather, and Marceline told herself she had not just lied to a cat. She gave her water in a shallow bowl and a piece of leftover chicken from the previous night's dinner, which the cat ate with focused efficiency, and then Marceline sat at the kitchen table with her coffee and watched her explore. The cat did not explore boldly. She moved through the rooms with a measured quality that Marceline found, against her will, interesting. Not the frantic investigation of a new animal in an unfamiliar space, but something more like the deliberate survey of someone noting exits, weight-bearing walls, the location of heat sources. She went through the kitchen, paused in the doorway to the living room, entered it, walked to the south window and looked out at the yard, then turned and looked at the bookshelf for a long moment, then crossed the room and sat down in front of the study door. The study door was closed. Marceline kept it closed. The cat sat in front of it and did not move. "That's not for you," Marceline said from the kitchen doorway. The cat sat. "There's nothing in there." The cat turned and looked at her, then turned back to the door. Marceline set her coffee mug down on the counter with more force than she intended. She went back to the kitchen table and opened the grocery receipt she had been meaning to file and filed it in the folder she kept in the drawer under the counter and told herself the cat would move eventually. 20 minutes later, when she went to close the living room curtains, the cat was still in front of the study door. Not scratching, not crying, just sitting in the posture of patient insistence, her body aimed at the door with the quiet certainty of something that knows it is correct. Marceline stood in the living room doorway and looked at her. The study had Gerald's desk in it, his collection of old road maps, which he had kept in a wooden box on the shelf because he did not trust GPS and said so loudly. His half-finished coffee mug, which she had not washed. She had not gone into the study in 14 months. "Come away from there," Marceline said, in a voice she recognized as the one she used when she was losing an argument she had not started. The cat did not come away. Marceline went to bed. In the morning, the cat was asleep on the rug at the foot of the study door. Not in front of it, not pressing against it, just near it, in the way that something settles near a thing it intends to return to. Marceline stepped over her on the way to the kitchen. She made coffee. She ate toast. She listened to the public radio station at just above silence volume. She washed the coffee mug and the toast plate and set them in the rack to dry. The cat appeared in the kitchen doorway, looked at her water bowl, looked at Marceline, and then went and sat by the water bowl in a way that made her situation clear without constituting a demand. Marceline refilled the bowl. "You're not staying," she said. The cat drank. "I'm going to call the animal rescue today." The cat finished drinking, shook one paw daintily, and walked back toward the living room. "I mean it," Marceline said to the empty kitchen. She did not call the animal rescue that day. She called it the following Monday, which was 4 days after the cat had arrived, and the woman who answered, a brisk, tired-sounding woman named Paulette, told her that the intake list was full through the end of the month, but that Marceline could bring the cat in at any point and leave her name on the waiting list, and that in the meantime she should keep the cat indoors and make sure she had food and water and a litter box, which Marceline was already doing, and that if the cat seemed ill or injured, she should call the veterinary clinic on 3rd Street. "She seems fine," Marceline said. "Healthy cats from that area are usually adoptable within a few weeks," Paulette said. "That's good," Marceline said. "Is there a name?" "For the record, Istantazidet Sexta Amwand." Marceline had not named her. Naming was a direction she was not going. "Cora," she said, and then was not certain why she said it, and was even less certain why it felt like the right answer once it was said. "Cora," Paulette repeated, and typed it into whatever she was typing into, and told her to call back when the list cleared. Marceline hung up the phone and looked at the cat, who was on the kitchen windowsill watching a cardinal in the redbud tree outside. The cardinal was a male, intensely red, lit up by the morning light that came over the ridge. The cat watched him with motionless intensity, her tail very still. "Don't get comfortable," Marceline said. The cat did not look at her. She was watching the cardinal. The first real problem arrived on a Thursday in the form of a phone call from the Fellowship Hall's property committee chairman, a man named Denny Holt, who had received a complaint from a neighbor. He did not say which neighbor, but Marceline knew the properties adjacent to the hall, and she had a reasonable suspicion that a stray cat had been seen on church property and had possibly been inside the building, and that the committee needed to be informed if any animals were being harbored on church grounds, as this was a liability matter and also a matter of pest control. And he said pest control in a tone that made it clear he had thought about whether to use that phrase and decided to use it anyway. Marceline listened to this without interrupting, which was her habit. She had a system for phone calls, the way she had a system for everything. Listen completely, respond only to what was actually said, do not introduce information that had not been requested. "The cat is no longer on church property," she said. "Good," Denny said. "We just want to make sure we're all on the same page." "We are," Marceline said. She hung up and looked at Cora, who was on the back of the couch watching her. "You need to stop going to the fellowship hall," Marceline said. Cora's left ear rotated. "I'm serious." The right ear followed. "I don't know how you get in there, and I don't need to know. Just stop." Cora looked at her for a moment with the expression Marceline was learning to read as something between patience and mild skepticism. Then she stepped off the back of the couch, walked across the cushion, stepped off the front, and went to lie in the patch of morning sun on the kitchen floor. Marceline sat down on the couch where the cat had just been. She did not usually sit on the couch in the mornings. She was a kitchen table person. But she sat there now, in the still warm spot the cat had left, and looked at the light coming through the south window, and for a moment, a brief, specific moment she could not quite account for, the house felt different, less like a thing she was maintaining, more like a place where something was happening. She got up and went to do the dishes. The child's name was Petra Sills. She was 9 years old, and she came to the Wednesday children's choir practice at First Methodist the way some children come to things, obligatorily, with the expression of someone serving a term. Her mother dropped her off in a hurry each week and picked her up with equal urgency, and in between, Petra sat in the second to last row and sang the notes correctly, but with the flat precision of someone meeting a minimum standard. Marceline noticed her because it was Marceline's job to notice the state of the fellowship hall, and the state of the fellowship hall included what was happening in it, and Petra was the kind of presence that registered, not because she did anything disruptive, but because she was conspicuously apart from the noise and motion of the other children, in a way that had an old, tired quality to it, as though she had been practicing separateness for longer than most 9-year-olds. She had been, Marceline learned from Bertie Oakes, whose granddaughter was in the same class at school, navigating a year that had included her parents' separation and a move from the house she had grown up in to a smaller rental on the other side of town. And she had responded to all of this by becoming very quiet and very correct and very much her own company. Marceline recognized the posture. She did not comment on it. What she had not anticipated was Cora. The cat had apparently not stopped going to the fellowship hall despite Marceline's instructions. On the first Wednesday in May, Marceline arrived to set up the hall for choir practice to find Cora already there, not in the storage closet this time, but in the second row of chairs, sitting on a seat with her paws tucked and her eyes half closed, as though she had been waiting for the room to fill. Marceline stood in the doorway and looked at her. "I specifically said," she said. Cora opened her eyes, looked at the room around her, and did not move. The children arrived. Cora watched them with the same measuring quality she applied to everything, not retreating, not performing, simply assessing. 3 children tried to pet her immediately. She moved 2 rows back. A fourth, a boy in a red shirt, called to her in a piercing voice. She moved another row back. By the time the choir director, a young woman named Andy, had gotten the group settled and begun the warm-up scales, Cora had retreated to the last row of chairs, where Petra was sitting. Marceline, wiping down the table at the back of the room with no intention of watching what happened, watched what happened. Cora jumped onto the empty chair beside Petra and sat there, not in the girl's lap, not soliciting attention, just present in the chair, with her body angled slightly toward the girl, 2 inches of open air between them. Petra looked at her with the wariness of someone who has been disappointed by things that looked promising before. Cora did not move. The choir director ran the scales. The children sang. Cora sat in the chair beside Petra and did not leave. After 10 minutes, without apparent decision, Petra moved her left hand from her lap to the edge of the chair seat, not touching the cat, just placing her hand there in the space between them as an offer or a question. Cora leaned her head and pressed it briefly against the side of Petra's hand. Then she pulled back, straightened, and resumed looking at the choir director. Petra stared at the side of her hand for a moment. Then she looked up at the choir director too, and when Andy asked them to try the second verse, Petra sang it with something Marceline could only describe as more than the minimum. She filed this observation without quite knowing where to put it. The second problem arrived when Marceline had almost forgotten the first one was still in play. It was the 3rd week of May, a Tuesday, and Marceline was on the porch of the house on Sycamore Hill Road in the early evening when she heard a car slow on the gravel lane and stop at the bottom. She looked down and saw that it was not a car she recognized, a black pickup, newer, with a dent in the left rear quarter panel. The man who got out was in his 60s, stocky, wearing a canvas work shirt despite the warmth of the evening. He looked up at the house with the expression of a man who had been working up to something. "Mrs. Drax?" he called. Marceline set down her coffee mug. "That's me." "My name is Alton Prewitt," he said. "I used to have an apartment above Massey Hardware. I think you might have my cat." She had known this was possible. She had not, she realized as she came down the porch steps, prepared for it in any concrete way. Alton Prewitt had driven up from Knoxville, a 2-hour trip, which he had done on a Tuesday evening after his shift at the hardware supply warehouse where he worked 3 days a week. He was polite in the way of someone managing a situation he was uncertain about, and he had a photograph on his phone, a photo of Cora on a blue blanket, younger and slightly rounder, looking at the camera with the same direct, unhurried gaze. And Marceline looked at the photograph for longer than was necessary to confirm the identification. "I asked Darby to look after her," he said. "I didn't know he was going to leave." "She managed," Marceline said. "She's tough," he said, with a pride that was real and had a weight behind it that she recognized, the pride of someone who knows an animal's character from long acquaintance. They stood in the gravel of the lane for a moment. The evening light was on the mountain. The redbud trees along the slope had already gone past their bloom and into their leaf, which was small and pale green in the low light. "She's inside," Marceline said. "If you want to see her." He did. They went up to the porch, and Marceline opened the door, and Alton Prewitt stepped into the hallway and looked around at the quiet, ordered house, and then Cora came around the corner from the living room and stopped in the middle of the hallway and looked at him. Marceline watched. She watched because she could not look away, and she was not sure she would have looked away if she could. What Cora did, she looked at Alton Prewitt for a full, measured moment. She recognized him. That was visible. Something in the set of her body changed. A small relaxation, a loosening of the careful assessment. She walked to him. She smelled his shoes. She allowed him to pick her up, and she held still in his arms while he held her with the particular care of a man who had carried her many times before and knew exactly how she fit. He looked at Marceline over the top of the cat's head. "She's in good shape," he said. "She's been eating well," Marceline said. They stood there, the three of them, in the hallway. Outside, the mountain was going dark at the top, the light pulling back up the slope. "My daughter's apartment doesn't allow animals," Alton said. He looked down at the cat in his arms. He said it in the tone of a man who had been saying it to himself for months. "I looked for somewhere that does. I can't afford the places that do." Marceline said nothing. "I'm not here to make trouble," he said. "I wanted to see her, and I wanted to say thank you for taking her in." "I'm on the waiting list at the rescue," Marceline said. The words came out on the old system, factual, immediate, neutral. She heard them herself and felt something odd about them, something slightly wrong, like a note played just flat. Alton nodded. He held the cat for another moment. Then he set her down, gently, on the hallway floor. Cora stood where she had been placed. She looked up at him. Then she turned and walked back into the living room, unhurried, in the direction of the kitchen. Alton watched her go. "She always did that," he said. "You'd think she was going to sit with you, and then she'd just go do something else, on her own terms." "I've noticed that," Marceline said. He thanked her again at the door. She watched his truck back down the gravel lane and turn onto the main road. She stood on the porch until the sound of the engine faded into the sounds of the mountain evening, creek water below the ridge, a thrush somewhere in the trees, the first cooling of the air that came at dusk, even in May. She went inside. Cora was in front of the study door. Marceline stood at the end of the hallway and looked at her. She had been in front of that door before, many times now, always in the same configuration, body aimed at the door, tail still, the quality of attention she brought to things she had decided to wait for. The study had Gerald's desk, his road maps in the wooden box, his half-finished coffee mug. Marceline stood in the hallway. The thrush outside sang its three-note call and then was quiet. She walked to the study door. Her hand on the knob was steadier than she expected. She opened it. The room smelled like him. That was the first thing. 14 months of a closed room, and still the smell had stayed. Pipe tobacco, though he had given up the pipe years before she met him, and cedar from the old blanket chest under the window, and something else underneath all of it, something she had never been able to name. That was simply his. The smell that belonged to a person the way a voice belongs to a person. She stood in the doorway. Cora walked past her, into the room, across the rag rug to the desk chair, where she jumped up and turned twice and settled with her chin on her front paws, facing the window and the dark shape of the mountain beyond it. She did not look at Marceline. She just settled, as though the room were a perfectly ordinary room in which she had been sitting for a long time. Marceline gripped the doorframe. The wooden box of road maps was on the shelf exactly as she had left it. The coffee mug on the desk, half full, dry now for over a year, positioned exactly as it had been the morning of the last ordinary day she could remember. Gerald's reading glasses folded beside it, one arm slightly askew, the way he always left them. She breathed. One breath, then another. She walked to the desk. She sat down in the chair beside it, the straight-backed one that had always been the visitor's chair, the chair she had sat in 100 times when she came in to tell him dinner was ready, or to ask where he had put the insurance papers, or just to sit in the same room with him while he read. She sat in that chair for a long time. Cora did not move from the desk chair. The mountain went fully dark outside the window. The thrush stopped. The creek ran below the ridge, and the house settled around them, and the half-finished coffee mug sat on the desk, and the road maps were in the wooden box on the shelf, and Marceline sat in the visitor's chair and let the room be what it was. Not an ending, not an opening, something in between those things. a door she had been standing on the wrong side of for 14 months. She was inside it now. She did not cry that evening. She had not expected to. The tears, when they came the following morning, when she was making coffee and the radio played a Patsy Cline song that had been Gerald's particular weakness, the kind of song he would turn up without warning and then look embarrassed that he had. And she stood at the counter with the coffee scoop in her hand and cried for 4 minutes, which was not nothing, and then she wiped her face and finished making the coffee and sat down at the kitchen table. Cora came and sat on the table in front of her, not in her lap, not pressing for contact, just on the table at close range, looking at her with the full and unapologetic attention that was her particular gift. "You're not supposed to be on the table," Marceline said. Cora looked at her. "I know," Marceline said. She reached out and scratched her once behind the left ear, which Cora received with her eyes going briefly soft. Then she moved the cat off the table, gently with both hands, the way you move something you intend to treat carefully, and poured her coffee and drank it. The radio played a weather report. Clearing skies, temperature in the low 60s, a beautiful May day coming over the ridge. Good. The intake list at the animal rescue cleared at the end of May, and Paulette called on a Friday morning while Marceline was at the fellowship hall restocking the supply closet. She let it go to voicemail. She stood in the supply closet with the clipboard in her hand and the phone in her pocket and looked at the shelves she was supposed to be counting. Paper cups, 3 cases. Coffee filters, 2 boxes, 1 partial. Napkins, full. She wrote the numbers on the sheet in her clean, deliberate handwriting and did not call Paulette back. She drove home and found Cora on the porch railing in the same corner where she had been on the first day, at the end where the railing met the post in the narrow rectangle of afternoon light. She was watching the mountain the way she often did, with the stillness of something that understood exactly what it was watching and had no complaint about it. Marceline sat in the glider, Gerald's glider, his porch. She sat in it for the first time since October. The cushion was faded and slightly damp from the rain earlier in the week. She sat anyway. The mountain was full and green in the May light, and the creek below the ridge was loud with the last of the snowmelt, and the redbud trees had given way to the deep, ordinary green of late spring, which was less spectacular than the bloom, but more itself. She did not call Paulette back that day, or the next. On Monday, she called and left a message saying the situation had changed and she would be in touch when she had more information. She was not entirely certain what the situation had changed to. She knew only that the study door was open now and that Cora slept each night on the desk chair, and that in the mornings when Marceline came to stand in the doorway with her coffee, the cat would lift her head and look at her and then look at the wooden box of road maps. And Marceline had begun, without announcing it to herself, to look at it too. The second problem, the real one, the one with weight, arrived on a Saturday in June in the form of a man named Denny Holt. He came to the house on Sycamore Hill Road, which was the kind of thing Denny Holt would do when he felt a situation required it, and he knocked on the porch door in the way of a man who had rehearsed the conversation in the car. He was the property committee chairman. He had a responsibility to the congregation. He had received another complaint from, he said carefully, a concerned member, that a cat had been seen inside the fellowship hall on multiple Wednesdays, including during children's activities, and that this was both a health code matter and a question of appropriate use of church property. Marceline listened to all of this from the porch steps, with her arms folded not in defensiveness, but in the posture she had developed over 53 years of standing on her own property and being told what was appropriate on it. "The cat attends choir practice," she said. Denny blinked. "I'm sorry?" "She comes in on Wednesdays and sits with the children during practice. She's clean and vaccinated, and she doesn't disturb the singing." This last point was true. She had brought Cora to the vet on 3rd Street the previous week. Dr. Vance, a compact woman with close-cropped hair and the unhurried manner of someone who had seen everything, and Cora was in good health, up to date on vaccinations, microchipped with the old chip that confirmed the information about Alton Prewitt, and entirely free of the things that concerned property committee chairman. "The health code," Denny began, "does not prohibit animals in non-food service spaces," Marceline said. "The kitchen is locked during choir practice. The hall is not a food service space. Denny looked at her. I verified this, she said, which was true. She had spent 20 minutes on the County Health Department website the previous Thursday, while Cora watched from the kitchen windowsill. He was quiet for a moment. He was a reasonable man at the core of things. She knew this about him, had always known it, even when he was being stiff about it. He was a man who ran on rules because rules were orderly, and order was how he understood care. She respected that somewhat. Some of the parents have expressed concern, he said, with less conviction than before. Which parents? He did not answer directly, which meant it was one parent, possibly one parent she could have named herself. The Sills girl's mother called me, he said finally. She said her daughter came home talking about the cat, and she wasn't sure it was appropriate. Marceline was quiet for a moment. Petra Sills, she said. Yes. She came home talking about the cat. Apparently. Before she started coming to choir practice, Marceline said. When did Petra Sills come home talking about anything from choir? Denny Holt looked at the porch floor. I'll take the concern under advisement, she said. And I'll speak with Dr. Vance about any documentation the committee needs. He left. She watched his car go down the gravel lane and thought about the particular irony of a child's mother complaining that her daughter had come home talking. She went inside and found Cora on top of the refrigerator, which was a new development. Get down, Marceline said. Cora looked at her from a height of 5 feet with the expression of someone who had heard this argument before and found it unconvincing. That's not a place. Cora's tail moved once. I will put you back on the intake list. Cora's tail moved again, a slow, complete sweep. I'm serious. Marceline got a kitchen chair, climbed on it with the care of a 61-year-old woman who knew better, and lifted the cat off the refrigerator with both hands. She set her on the floor. She got down from the chair. She stood there for a moment with her hands on her hips, and then, because there was no one watching, she laughed. It was not a large laugh. It was short and dry and slightly surprised at itself, but it moved through her chest the way a laugh is supposed to move, and it lasted 4 or 5 seconds, and when it was over, she felt faintly lighter. Cora looked up at her with what might have been approval. The heat settled in over the mountains in the 3rd week of June, the particular heavy heat of a Kentucky summer that comes down from the ridges and stays, not the punishing heat of the flatlands, but close enough and humid enough that the town moved slower, and the air above the road shimmered at midday, and the creek below the ridge dropped and slowed and turned from gray to a clear brown, the color of tea. Marceline had not thought about the road maps in the wooden box until the cat showed her they were there. Cora had been sleeping on the desk chair in the study for 6 weeks. She had expanded her territory in the room incrementally. First the desk chair, then the corner of the desk itself, then the narrow shelf beside the window where Gerald had kept his library books in progress. She had not touched the wooden box. On a Tuesday in late June, Marceline came into the study in the morning to open the window. She had been opening the study window in the mornings now, letting the mountain air through, letting the room breathe, and found Cora on the shelf beside the wooden box. Not on top of it, beside it. Her right paw was resting against its side, not pawing at it, not attempting to open it, just touching it. She was looking at Marceline. Marceline stood in the doorway. The wooden box had a brass latch. Gerald had bought it at an estate sale in Harlan in 1987 and filled it over the following decades with road maps from every state he had driven through, which was most of them east of the Rockies. He had a system for the maps, folded a specific way, ordered by region, and he had talked about for the last 10 years of his life doing a long drive. Not the Rockies specifically, just a long drive. Somewhere he hadn't been. They had never gone. Marceline crossed the room. She lifted Cora's paw off the box gently. Cora allowed this, watching her. She set the paw back on the shelf. She opened the wooden box. The maps were there, folded the way he'd folded them, ordered the way he'd ordered them. Tennessee, Virginia, West Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, Alabama. She recognized his handwriting on some of them, small notes in the margins, gas station exits, a road he'd recommended to someone and wanted to remember. One map, Tennessee, the big crinkled one, had a circle drawn on it in blue ink in the northwest corner of the state, around a town she didn't immediately recognize. She did not know when he had drawn it. She did not know why. She closed the box and put it back on the shelf. She opened the window. She stood there for a moment, with the morning air coming through, smelling of the mountain and the creek and the particular green smell of June. "All right," she said to no one in particular. Cora was watching her from the shelf. "I know," Marceline said. She called Bertie Oakes that afternoon, which she did not often do. Bertie was the kind of neighbor who could be trusted with the practical and the personal in equal measure, and she had the additional virtue of asking only as many questions as the situation required. "I found something in the study," Marceline said. "Gerald's study?" "Yes." "Are you all right?" "I'm fine. I found his road maps." Bertie was quiet for a moment, which was its own kind of answer. "He had a circle on the Tennessee map," Marceline said. "Around a town. I don't know when he drew it. So, you come to Basin skies. Did you recognize the town?" "No." "Are you going to look it up?" Marceline had not thought until that moment that this was a question. "I suppose so," she said. "Good," Bertie said. "While you have me, do you need tomatoes yet? I've got early girls coming in." "Not yet," Marceline said. "Maybe next week." "Next week then," Bertie said. And that was that. The town on the map was Clifton, Tennessee. Population under 1,000. On the Tennessee River, in a county that ran down to the Alabama border. She looked it up that evening while Cora sat at the edge of the desk, watching the screen with the focused attention she applied to most things. There was not much to find. A small town, known locally for fishing, a historical district with a few old storefronts, a ferry crossing that was one of the last operating car ferries on the Tennessee River. The ferry had been running since 1920. Gerald had had a particular fondness for things that were still doing what they had always done. She sat with this for a while. She did not know why he had circled it. She did not know if he had been there or had only meant to go, or had heard something about it from someone at some point and written it down the way he wrote things down, carefully, with the intention of returning. She could not ask him. She could, she supposed, go and see. This thought arrived quietly and sat down beside the others in her mind and did not make any demands. She noticed it was there. She did not do anything about it immediately. Cora got up, walked across the desk, and stepped off the front of it and into Marceline's lap, with more confidence than she had previously displayed about that particular territory. Marceline sat very still. Cora turned once, pressed her head briefly against Marceline's forearm, and settled, not heavily, not with the complete commitment of a cat that had been doing this for years, but with the particular quality of a first time that intends to become a habit. Marceline put one hand on her back carefully and felt the small motor of the purring begin. Outside, the creek ran below the ridge. The mountain was dark against the last light in the sky. Somewhere on the slope, the thrush was singing, that three-note call it repeated until it was satisfied. She sat there. She did not move for a long time. The thing that almost went wrong came in July. Marceline had, by then, stopped thinking of herself as someone who was temporary in Cora's life, or Cora as temporary in hers, though she had not said so aloud to anyone except, loosely, to Paulette at the animal rescue, whom she had called to remove herself from the intake waiting list, and who had responded with a short, "Oh, good," that contained more warmth than her usual tone, and which Marceline had found unexpectedly moving. The crisis arrived in the shape of a letter. It came on a Tuesday, in an envelope with a Knoxville return address she recognized from the folder of notes she had kept when Alton Prewitt came to the house. It was from his daughter, a woman named Brianne, who had written it with evident care. The handwriting was deliberate, the language polite, to say that she had found an apartment building in Knoxville that allowed pets, and that her father had applied and been approved, and that they would like to come in the third week of July to collect Cora, and that they were very grateful for the care that had been taken of her. Marceline read the letter twice. She set it on the kitchen table and looked at it. Then she got up and walked through the house to the study, where Cora was in her usual position on the desk chair, and she stood in the doorway and looked at the cat in Gerald's chair, in Gerald's room, against the background of Gerald's road maps in the wooden box on the shelf. She looked at the open window and the mountain beyond it, and the light of a July morning that was yellow and clear and full of the smell of creek water and honeysuckle from the hillside. She went back to the kitchen and called her daughter. Marceline did not have children. She and Gerald had decided early and honestly that they were not people who would do it well, which was a harder decision to make in Harlan in 1987 than it sounds. The person she called her daughter was her niece, Tamara, who lived in Louisville and was 38 and worked in hospital administration and called every other Sunday without fail. They were not demonstrative. They understood each other. "I need to think something through," Marceline said. "All right," Tamara said. Marceline told her about the letter, about Alton Prewitt, about the study door, which she had not told Tamara she had opened, and about the road maps, and about the circle around Clifton, Tennessee, and about the purring, which she described in the way she described most things, factually, without interpretation. She talked for 11 minutes, which was longer than she usually talked. Tamara listened. When Marceline finished, Tamara said, "What do you want to do?" "I don't know," Marceline said. "Yes, you do," Tamara said. "You always know. You just want someone to hear you say it." Marceline was quiet. "What do you want to do, Aunt Marceline?" The kitchen was quiet. The radio was at just above silence volume, playing something classical she didn't recognize. Through the window, the redbud tree had gone fully into its summer green, and a wren was moving through its branches with the busy efficiency of a creature that had no time for philosophy. "I want to keep her," Marceline said. It was the first time she had said it in those words, and the words felt both small and exactly the right size. "Then call Alton Prewitt and tell him," Tamara said. "He has a legal claim. He has a history. That's different from a claim. Call him and talk to him like a person and see what he says. Mai kunstine, namar mai quere, bao, you mai kuntiwo, barmaresen, marati, you do dur dekano." What Alton Prewitt said when she called him was, "I was hoping you'd call." He said it in a voice that had something tired and relieved in it simultaneously. He said his daughter's apartment had come through faster than he'd expected, and it was genuine and good news, and he was glad about it, but that he had been sitting with the question of Cora and what was right, and he had not been able to answer it to his own satisfaction. "She was alone for 5 weeks," he said, "before you took her in, and before that she was with me. But I was... Mans Mouse. I wasn't well for the last year, before I moved. The apartment got small. She needed more than I could give her." Marceline listened. "She's been with you for what, 3 months now?" he said. 12 weeks, Marceline said. "She came to you on her own." "Apparently. Animals do that sometimes," he said. "They find what they need. I think Cora's pretty good at that." "She is," Marceline said. There was a pause on the line, not an uncomfortable one. The kind of pause between two people who are both arriving at the same place from different directions. "I'd like to visit," he said. "Sometimes, if that's all right. Not to take her back, just to see her. She was good company for a long time." "That would be all right," Marceline said. She meant it. The fellowship hall matter resolved itself in August, in a way Marceline had not planned for. Andy, the choir director, presented a petition to the property committee, signed by 11 of the 14 families in the children's choir, including, Marceline noticed, the Sills family, requesting that the cat be allowed to continue attending Wednesday practice as a regular, informal presence, on the grounds that attendance had improved, that 3 children who had previously been withdrawn had become noticeably more engaged, and that Cora had, in the phrase of one parent, that Marceline heard second-hand and found either charming or embarrassing, become the heart of the room. Denny Holt presented this to the full committee with the expression of a man who had been outmaneuvered by an animal and was not entirely sure how it had happened. The committee voted yes. Marceline was not at the meeting. She heard about it from Bertie Oakes the next morning, over the fence between their yards, while Bertie was staking her tomato plants and Marceline was refilling the bird feeder. "You should have been there," Bertie said. Denny's face. "I can imagine it," Marceline said. "He voted yes, though. He would. He's a fair man." Bertie looked at her over the fence with the expression she wore when she was deciding whether to say a thing. "How are you?" she said. It was a different question than it usually was when people asked it. Marceline recognized the difference. "Better," she said. It was the most honest, short answer she had. "Good," Bertie said. "Here." She handed a large beefsteak tomato over the fence with both hands. "These have been waiting for you." ACT 3, August in the mountains. The heat held on longer than the summer had earned the right to, the way heat sometimes does in the high country, passed its welcome into the dry end of things. The creek below the ridge had dropped to a murmur, and the redbud trees along the slope had gone dusty in their green, and the air in the afternoon had the particular heaviness that precedes a change. Marceline noticed the change in the house before she noticed it anywhere else. She had begun eating dinner in the study. Not every night. 3 times a week, perhaps 4. She would make a plate and carry it in and set it on the edge of the desk and eat while the window was open and the mountain evening air came through, and Cora sat on the desk chair and watched the yard go dark. The wooden box of road maps was still on the shelf. The coffee mug was still on the desk. She had not washed it and had decided she would not wash it, that it was allowed to simply be what it was, the last unfinished cup on the last ordinary morning, in the room where a person she loved had spent a good portion of his best hours. She had begun to talk in the study too. Not to anyone. Not to the room exactly, just aloud, the way you talk when you have been quiet for a long time and the silence has grown large enough that filling it feels like a form of care. She talked about the tomatoes Bertie had given her, which were extraordinary. She talked about the rain that had finally come in the second week of August and what it had done to the creek, bringing it back up, running clear and cold again over the rocks. She talked about Petra Sills, who had started coming to the fellowship hall on Saturdays to help set up for the food distribution, not invited, just arriving, the way some children arrive at things when the thing has made room for them somewhere they did not expect. Cora listened, or sat in the presence of the words, which was close enough. The trip happened on a Saturday in the last week of August. Marceline had not decided it was going to happen on that specific day. She had been thinking about Clifton, Tennessee, in the background of other thoughts, the way you think about a thing you have been circling for a while, and then she had woken up on that Saturday with the windows open and the first edge of autumn on the air. Not cool exactly, but less heavy, a suggestion of something shifting, and she had made coffee and come to stand in the study doorway and looked at the wooden box and known, plainly and without drama, that it was time. She put Cora in the carrier, which Cora tolerated with the resigned patience she reserved for veterinary visits and other non-negotiable inconveniences. "You're coming," Marceline told her. "I'm not leaving you home for this." She had not been sure she was going to say that. She had not been sure she would take the cat. But the words had come out on their own, and once said they were right, and she put the carrier in the back seat of the Subaru and took the Tennessee map from the wooden box and spread it on the passenger seat and looked at the blue circle in the northwest corner. The drive was 2 hours and 20 minutes south, down through the mountains and the hollows and the long valley roads of southeast Tennessee, with the windows down for most of it because the morning air was good. Cora was quiet in the back seat, not distressed, not protesting, just sitting in the carrier with the contained composure she brought to most situations, watching the landscape change through the wire door. Marceline drove. She drove the way Gerald had liked to drive, unhurried, using the state roads rather than the highway, taking the road that ran alongside the river because it was better to see water when you could see it. She talked to Cora some of the way. She said things she had not said to anyone. Some of them she said only once and would not have been able to repeat. That was all right. They did not need to be said more than once to be said. Clifton was a small, quiet town at the bottom of a long slope, sitting at a bend in the Tennessee River where the water was wide and slow and the color of old glass. The main street had the preserved, unhurried quality of a place that had not needed to reinvent itself because it had always known what it was. Hardware store, drugstore with a lunch counter inside, a diner with a hand-painted sign that said "Open" in letters that had been repainted enough times to have layers. The ferry landing was at the south end of town, at the bottom of a road that sloped down to the river's edge. She parked on the gravel lot above it and sat for a moment. The ferry was there, a flat-bottomed boat, unglamorous, with a wooden platform and a small wheelhouse, exactly the kind of old functional thing Gerald would have driven 2 hours to see. 2 cars were already on it. A man in overalls was unhooking the dock line. She looked at it for a long moment. Then she got out, went to the back seat, opened the carrier, and let Cora out into the car. She sat in the back seat with her, which she had never done before, and Cora walked from the carrier onto the seat and stood there, looking out the window at the river. He would have liked this, Marceline said. The ferry began to move away from the dock, very slowly, pushing a small wave out ahead of it on the brown water. He would have wanted to know how old the engine was, she said. He would have talked to the man in overalls for 45 minutes and come back knowing his father's name and the history of the landing back to 1920. Cora was very still, watching the ferry on the water. "I should have come here with him," Marceline said. "I know that." She sat with it. The ferry reached the midpoint of the river. The man in overalls stood at the bow. The water was glass on the far side of the wake. "I'm here now," she said. This was not comfort exactly. It was not consolation. It was just the fact of it that she was here in the last week of August with a cat she had not asked for and a wooden box of maps she had not opened in 14 months, in a town a man she had loved had circled in blue ink for reasons she would never fully know, and that this was what remaining looked like sometimes. Not restored, not healed in the way that word was too easily used, just present. In the next right place, arrived at by a route she had not planned. Cora turned from the window and walked across the seat and stepped carefully into Marceline's lap. She did not ask permission. She settled in the specific, committed way she had settled the first time, the brief head press to the forearm, the arrangement of herself, the beginning of the purring, low and steady and real. Marceline put her arm around her. Outside, the river moved past. The ferry was on the far bank now, loading its return passengers, a truck, a bicycle, a woman with a folded lawn chair under her arm. On the near side, a heron was standing at the water's edge, motionless, patient, looking at the slow current with the full attention of a creature that understood exactly where it was. Marceline watched the heron for a long time. Then she picked up her phone and called Tamara. "I'm in Tennessee," she said. "Are you all right?" "Yes," she said. "I'm in the town on the map, the one with the circle." There was a pause. "How is it?" "Small," Marceline said. "Good. He would have liked it." "I think so too," Tamara said. "Are you coming home today?" "This afternoon," Marceline said. "I want to eat at the diner first. Does the cat get a plate?" Marceline looked at Cora in her lap. "She'll have whatever I don't finish." Tamara laughed. It was a good sound over the phone in the parking lot above the river landing. "Is prey." They ate at the diner. Marceline had the plate lunch, country ham, butter beans, cornbread on the side, and Cora, back in her carrier in the back seat with the door open and a piece of ham set on the carrier's threshold, ate her portion in the dignified and thorough manner she applied to all food. They drove home in the late afternoon, with the windows down again and the air cooling as they climbed back into the mountains. The light came through the gaps in the ridge at a long angle, laying gold stripes across the road and the tree line, and the creek along the state route ran clear and cold in the last of the summer warmth. Marceline had the Tennessee map on the passenger seat. She would fold it when she got home and put it back in the wooden box in the order it belonged. She had considered, and then not considered, making her own circle. The circle Gerald had made was enough. She had found it, and she had gone. That was what she had to do with it, yeah. September came over the mountains, with the smell of leaves beginning to turn, and the mornings going sharper, and the creek finding its full voice again after the dry end of summer. The redbud trees along the slope went yellow and brief and beautiful, the way they always did, and the mountain above the house changed slowly from green to the amber and rust patchwork of a Kentucky fall. Marceline opened the study window every morning now. The half-finished coffee mug was still on the desk. Gerald's reading glasses were still beside it. She had decided these things could stay as long as she wanted them to stay, and that this was not avoidance, but care, the choice to keep something close because it was worth keeping close. She had moved his winter coats from the hall closet, not thrown away, donated 2 to the Fellowship Hall's winter clothing drive and 1 to a man named Curtis, who came to the food distribution every Saturday and who was Gerald's size and who had, she thought, Gerald's particular way of holding his shoulders in cold weather, as though bracing for something that might not come, just in case. Curtis had tried the coat on in the parking lot and said it fit like it was made for him. "It was made for someone about your size," Marceline said, which was close enough to true. On the last Saturday of September, Alton Prewitt came to visit. He came in the afternoon, as planned, with a small bag of the specific food Cora had eaten for the first 4 years of her life, which he brought without being asked, and which Cora smelled at length before accepting as an acceptable supplement to her current diet. He sat on the porch with Marceline and drank the coffee she made, and they talked about the fellowship hall and his work at the warehouse and the change in the weather coming down from the mountains. Cora came out onto the porch and walked to the glider and jumped up onto it, settling in the space between Marceline and the arm of the glider. Not in Alton's direction, not away from him, just in her own place, in the middle of the porch, with the mountain in front of her and the sound of the creek below the ridge. Alton watched her. He looked like a man watching something he loved at a comfortable distance, the particular piece of someone who has made the right decision about a hard thing and knows it. "She looks good," he said. "She's well," Marceline said. "Happy?" Marceline considered this because it was a real question and deserved a real answer. "I think she's where she decided to be," she said. "I think that amounts to the same thing." Alton nodded slowly. He looked out at the mountain. "How about you?" he asked. Marceline was quiet for a moment. The thrush was somewhere in the trees on the slope, repeating its three-note call. "Getting there," she said. He nodded again, as if that was the exactly right answer, which it was. The fellowship hall on Wednesdays in October smelled of cider and something baking in the kitchen. Someone was bringing apple cake, which had become a tradition Marceline did not recall authorizing, but had decided to accept. The children's choir was practicing for the harvest service, something involving a three-part round that Andy had been patiently working on for 2 weeks. Petra Sills was in the front row now, had been since August. She had not announced the change. She had simply moved up 1 week, 2 rows, and then another week, 2 more, until she was in the front with the other children who knew all the words and were not protecting themselves from the possibility of being heard. Cora was in the back row, her usual chair, watching the choir director with the invested attention she brought to Wednesday practice. Marceline was at the table at the back, checking the supply inventory because someone had used the last of the coffee filters without marking the sheet, and she was going to find out who. She was not watching Petra. She was not watching Cora. She was watching the inventory sheet, which was where her attention belonged. But she heard it. The third verse of the round, which was the hardest part, the part the children had not managed cleanly in 2 weeks of practice. And then, all at once, not perfectly, not quite, but close enough to feel like something, the 3 parts came together the way they were supposed to, each voice in its place, the whole thing locking into the shape it had always been meant to have. Andy stopped conducting and just listened. The children kept singing. Cora jumped down from the back row chair. She walked the length of the hall in the unhurried way she walked everything, measured, deliberate, entirely herself, and stopped 2 feet from the front row. She sat down. She faced the choir. She listened with her ears fully forward and her tail still and her whole body angled toward the sound. Petra saw her and smiled, not a small, protected smile, a full one, the kind that crosses a face before the person decides whether to allow it. Marceline looked up from the inventory sheet. She watched the cat listening to the children sing in the October light coming through the fellowship hall windows, in the smell of apple cake and cider and the particular Tuesday warmth that lingered into Wednesday in the mountains in early fall. She put the inventory sheet down. She was not certain how long she stood there. Long enough for the round to finish and for Andy to say quietly, "That was it. That was what we've been working for." Long enough for Petra to reach down and touch the top of Cora's head, not asking, knowing by now the answer, and for Cora to accept it with the closed eyes and lifted chin of an animal completely at home. Marceline picked the inventory sheet back up. Someone had used the last of the coffee filters and not marked the sheet. This was still true. The fellowship hall still needed running, and the clipboard still needed attending to, and the supply closet still needed someone whose system was good enough to hold everything in place. These things had not changed. She had changed, not all the way, not in any way that would be visible from a distance, but from where she stood, in the back of the fellowship hall on a Wednesday in October, watching a 9-year-old girl and a cat who had chosen each other from opposite directions of loneliness. She was not the same woman who had told a cat in April that it could not stay. She folded the inventory sheet and put it in her pocket. She would call Denny Holt about the coffee filters in the morning, some Sandakrai say. That evening, Marceline sat in the study at the desk, not in the visitor's chair, but in Gerald's chair, which she had not sat in before. And the mountain was going dark outside the window, and the creek was running below the ridge with the full, cold voice it found in October. And the wooden box of road maps was on the shelf beside the road atlas Gerald had kept for years, past its usefulness because he liked the weight of it. Cora jumped onto the desk and walked to the wooden box and sat beside it with her paw against its side, the way she had in June. Marceline opened the box. She took out the Tennessee map and set it on the desk. She took out the others, one by one, the ones for the states east of the Rockies, the ones with Gerald's careful marginal notes about gas exits and recommended roads, and the names of people he had talked to who knew the area. She set them on the desk in order, spread wide, overlapping at the edges, the way a person might spread maps when they are planning a route. She was not planning a route. She was just looking at them. Cora stepped from the box to the edge of the nearest map, placed one paw on Tennessee, looked up at Marceline, and then looked back at the maps. The light in the room was the lamp beside the desk, low and warm. Outside, the first cold front of the autumn was moving down from the ridge, and the trees along the slope were making the sound they made in wind, which was not quite a whisper and not quite a voice. Marceline sat with her hands on the maps and her cat beside her and the mountain outside the window and let herself feel plainly that this was good. Not what she had lost, not what she had been before. The creek ran. The trees moved. Cora pressed her head, briefly and completely, against the side of Marceline's hand, and then straightened and turned and watched the window and the dark mountain and the wind moving through the October trees. She stayed,